This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, Nolan here. We're going to continue our conversation with Coach Riise in just a minute, but make sure if you didn't already listen to part A of this episode that you do that before listening to part B. Something that you mentioned earlier was, how important it is to be flexible. And so I'm wondering, kind of as we look at biases that you may have towards someone when they're doing something and you're comparing it to basically how you do something, there's inevitably going to be some biases. So what kind of work do you do with your clients to effectively increase self-introspection, but while you're simultaneously managing negative perceptions of others?
It's a great question, and I appreciate it on a number of different levels. First of all, I'm not an expert in biases. If I highly recommend, if you haven't read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, I would highly recommend it. I think you guys have mentioned it before too. Mm-hmm. And there's some great resources and lists I can provide the listeners that kind of list out what the biases are and what they mean. The way that I think about biases is kind of like the shadow side of thinking. And Carl Jung talked about that too, so how do I project myself to others, right? So I think that the one that I'll talk about, I just recently listened to it on a podcast, is really profound to me, is this idea that we have bias blind spots, and what's is called the introspection illusion. So when I'm coaching clients if you hear someone say, well, I'm pretty self-aware, that's a red flag. That's a red flag, because someone who thinks they're self-aware, just like somebody who thinks they know everything, probably isn't as self-aware as they think. Right. And so, which relates to another type of, bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect. But going back to the introspection illusion, is that the way that we judge ourselves is incongruent with how we judge others. And let's go back to the Chris Rock, Will Smith incident. Right. And so when we see, and we can look at them separately and objectively. Right. So let's look at Chris Rock for a second. Chris Rock, obviously made an inappropriate joke towards Jada Pinkett's hair. She's got alopecia, so on and so forth. So you can look at it from that lens. And you say, well, Chris Rock was wrong, and I would never do anything like that. That's what we do, right? And so which is another form of bias, which is kind of character assassination. Where that guy's a jackass, right? That's kind of what people are reacting to and vomiting on social media, right? Then that let's look at Will Smith. Same thing happens, right? You're like, Will Smith, he's this high character guy, and he just completely ruined his reputation, and he should have never got up and slapped Chris Rock in front of television, And you see what's happening, right? I would never do anything like Chris Rock. I would never act inappropriately like that too. Well, let's hold on for a second, right? Chances are, and we may not have done it on the world stage, and we may not have slapped and done things like that too, but chances are we've been a jackass, and in small ways or big ways, right? But how we see ourselves and how we judge others are completely different. We look at the 10% of the iceberg and we don't account for everything that's below the surface, right? But when we look at ourselves, we think we see the 90% of the iceberg, and we don't see the rest of the 90% of the iceberg. And that is the hard truth that we have to understand as human beings and as leaders, is that we are not omnipotent. There's no such thing as 100% self-aware. So how are you going to get feedback? Yeah. More important, how are you going to turn that feedback into feed forward? And I think that's really important in terms of who you surround yourself with, an executive board that people are going to tell you the truth, that are going to, they're going to do it in a way that is going to allow you to get better, that you trust. And that you approach everything that you do as an opportunity to be able to get better, versus be defensive and realize that I've got it all figured out, or I'm like the best things in sliced bread to negotiate. Right.
That's awesome. Thanks, Andy.
And I might just dig a little deeper here, Andy. Other things you do to increase how do I increase my self-awareness when I think I'm self-aware? How can I become more aware of my 90%, and then I guess how does that translate? More I can do to translate into understanding somebody else's 90%.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, and again, this is the only practice that I actually mandate when I'm working one-on-one with clients, athletes, whoever you guys listed, is like to journal, and I think to be reflective. Like, we know the memory is really fallible, so do it in the moment. You could do this in like pre-post negotiation too, is like, hey, where I'm capturing my thoughts like in real time. And then what's happening is, but the tactile movement, the research shows that I'm actually writing it down. It's not about going back and referencing the notes. That's why you and I, as former Army officers, got these like shelves full of green notebooks, right?
Right.
How many times have you pulled those green notebooks out? Yeah.
Nolan's got one. There it
Our
is.
boy Joe Byerly from the Green Notebook. It's not about recalling it, but it's about being in the present moment. And it's about that is a performance that is helping solidify things into your long-term memory that can become habit formation, right? In terms of what I do. So that is really one. The other one, I think, like I mentioned too, is like, who are the people in your life that you can trust, that are going to give you different perspectives? Like, and I love the Mount Rushmore approach, or the executive board of your life, and then there's some great, if you read your Mount Rushmore, like who are the 4 people based on and each of those traits of the presidents. Teddy Roosevelt's one of my favorite ones, obviously, who have a perspective that they're going to give you, whether it's like from, for me, it's the different hats that are maybe from a father standpoint, maybe from a leader standpoint, maybe from a peer standpoint, maybe from a former subordinate standpoint. They're going to give you this perspective to maybe help fill in the gaps that we ultimately have as human beings, right? Knowing that we're never going to be 100% self-aware, right? But if we're willing to, first of all, get uncomfortable with this idea that, I'm going to make mistakes and then learn from it, that gives you the opportunity to get better every time you go enter a negotiation or enter anything that you consider a performance, from mundane to masterful.
Well, Andy, so you shared earlier that you went through negotiation training several times during pre-deployment readiness, and as I shared kind of in the intro, you worked with me when I was teaching at the Air Force Academy with our negotiation final exam, and have a really good sense of the kind of our approach. Given the skills and your extensive background in mental performance, where do you think negotiation training programs could learn from your field and could improve?
I mean, I would love to have interdisciplinary collaboration. Like, this is a great start, right? Like, you guys have this awesome depth of knowledge, skills, and experience, and from the interpersonal side, and I have it from the interpersonal side, and we're bringing those worlds together. And I think, what we're seeing is the rise of what I call the paraprofessional. It's the Swiss Army knife. If you read the book Range, it talks about being a generalist. And I think that what's great is that we have all this information at our fingertips that allows us to synthesize all of these otherwise would be intangible skills that we can now measure, and that we can train, that we can practice with intentionality and deliberateness, that make us better at what we do. And I think when you are able to marry them up together, it's just it's this incredible combination that I think is really, really valuable. Unfortunately, they're not trained in tandem. They are held separately. They're in silos, right? They're not brought together because they come from different disciplines. So what I would like to see is a more interdisciplinary approach. And I would not only like to see an interdisciplinary approach, but I like to see it being delivered in accessible to a lot of people through digital means. And I think you guys are trying to do that, which I commend you to, because what's really cool post-pandemic is this, we're all working remotely. We're able to reach more people and train and educate people better. What if we were able to make negotiations and mental skills training more accessible to every person who needs it? It's not just for the elite and the very few, and I'll never forget, I was this close, guys, to getting me and my fire support crew to go to Harvard to go take a negotiations course, and it got canceled the last minute because I think they figured out that it was probably a boondoggle in disguise, but that's another story. But I should have gone up the road to the Air Force Academy, had you teach this, Aaron. But, my point is, it's like, not everybody has access to this important skill set. They don't have access to my skill set either, right? The people that need it the most, from my mental skill standpoint, are the coaches and athletes in the middle school and high school level. That's where it begins, right? Imagine if leaders could get access to this skill set, not when they're an executive, but when they're a junior emerging leader into a new role, when they're coming out of West Point, which is so awesome. The West Point Negotiations Project is there, and so those are the really, I call them the axiom moments, right? When I'm making a transition, to a different role or to a different organization, those axiom moments in our lives and our careers is when you really need this the most, I think. So having access and democratizing this skill set is really important.
Yes.
Well, let's continue this, because Andy, you had said that, basically trying to build the paraprofessional here. So what else can we take from your field and apply it, especially when it comes down to the preparation aspect of negotiations? Is something that Aaron and I lean heavy on when we interact with any of our clients. And that's to basically place a large emphasis on preparations, and especially preparing for difficult conversations or really challenging conversations, anything of that sort. So what can we take from your field and apply it there?
No, I think a really good one that maybe a little bit out of the box for our listeners is this idea of using imagery for bringing it into our rehearsal, right? So the idea of imagery, like some people call it visualization, but it's the ability to be able to use your imagination and to make it vivid, personal, and powerful, to create these images in your mind that are almost as good as actually physically practicing it, right? Actually going through the motions, right? So if you're able to use the skill of imagery, we're bringing in all your senses. So bringing in your sight, bringing your smell, bringing the taste, bringing the feel. And, if we have context, the context then allows us to provide a mental framework for what this looks like and what I want the negotiation to look like. So you think about just like, hey, if I was doing a squat, I can see myself do the perfect squat. If I was a pitcher, I can just see myself doing the perfect pitch. If I was performing a surgery, I can see myself every single motion, going through that and executing it perfectly. You can do the same thing in terms of how you mentally rehearse and do a reconnaissance of what's going to actually happen. And the better you get at that, you're actually changing the structure of your brain through the idea of neuroplasticity. And there's a lot of research that goes into this. And what's cool is that I saw Green Berets do this, right? They treated what they were about to go do, their movement to a KLE or a Shura, and then the movement back, and they use it during the rehearsal of concept, the rock drill, right? Well, during your rehearsal, can you imagine incorporating imagery both individually and collectively together, using all of your senses to be as vivid, personal, and powerful, and then incorporating that into your preparation for what you're about to go do with the different people? It's a really powerful tool. And then on the flip side, you use imagery on the backside too. Now I'm individually going back through and reviewing the game film, because we don't always have the eye in sky doesn't lie, right? But if I am able to use this most powerful movie studio that's ever known to man, that's between my ears, I can look back and reflect on what just happened to be able to synthesize information that can be useful for me and my team. And so I think using the use of imagery has all kinds of different, applications that we could use in the 4 phases to get ready and improve in our ability to negotiate.
So let's just go a little bit further, because I'd love for you to coach me. Let's imagine that I have a tough negotiation tomorrow with a supplier that I'm really heavily dependent on to be able to produce a widget that my customers need. And boy, the last time I engaged with this person, they were incredibly difficult. We've worked together for a long time, but it's always really stressful, very tense. Maybe they play a lot of games. How do I apply what you just said to get ready to have a better conversation?
Well, I think we would start off with is we're going to kind of frame, we're going to let's just talk through it, right? So we're going to have a talk through, right? So let's just do some role play, right? So like, hey, I'm me, and you're going to be the tough customer, right? And I love the tough customer, right? Because we experienced that too. I don't know if you remember when I was the AMP, I was the police officer.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You did. You role played.
Yeah. I love being the tough customer, right? Because I try to get a reaction out of the cadets, the Air Force Academy. I had so much fun doing that, right? But like, you play the tough customer, right? And then we're just wargaming, right? And then or what's called red teaming in the civilian world, right? To where, I'm going through scenarios and how to act, react, and then we're pressing pause, and now I'm giving you feedback on what just happened, like in an open-ended way, where I'm getting you to think on your feet, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just like anything, right? If I make the practice harder than the actual negotiation is, by the time I've trained and shifted to the trusting mindset, it's easy. I'm just letting my interpersonal skills out, right? Because I'm ready, and I know I'm ready, and I'm confident. I'm projecting confidence in a humble and authentic way, right? But then everything that I've done has now gone through all the potential, the PACE plan, the primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency, action reactions as far as what could happen, right? And inevitably Murphy's going to show up, right? And we always know that, right? But like, if I'm psychologically flexible because I've gone through the difficult discomfort in the preparation, the likelihood I'll be more effective is going to be, self-evident.
So you're a mental skills coach. I'm going to assume you've never made any sort of mistake when you're applying these concepts yourself. And that you are the epitome of perfection. And of course I'm joking, but I think sometimes it's helpful for our listeners to hear, can you share an example of a time when maybe you failed to apply some of the key concepts? What did you learn from that? And then as the follow-up, just give it to you now, which is, what's a time that you look back up and you're like, yeah, I really had a lot of success because I applied what I know. And maybe just tell us why that was so successful. So something you consider a failure, something you consider a success.
No, I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, here's a little trade secret. Don't tell anybody, is that, everybody who's in psychology is kind of crazy. And we got something to work on, right? It's just like anything. And oh, by the way, coaches are almost the worst, generally speaking, at applying what they teach. No, but I'm a work in progress. Just ask my wife. I'm a fixer upper, whatever you want to call it, and so, I think as a young leader, like I talked about, like that temper, right? And I think when I started I didn't really have a very good platoon sergeant. So remember at West Point, we were led to believe we had this knight shining armor, this platoon sergeant that we're supposed to shut up and listen to the promised land, the land of milk and honey. I didn't get that guy, right? Staff Sergeant Leatherman was not a knight in shining armor. He was a turd who drove a purple scooter to work and was absent most of the time, right? So I was left flapping, right? And so like I didn't, enter in, I didn't know how to hold people accountable the right way, right? And so I was trying to be friendly, and I got walked all over, frankly, and so I was flapping. And then by the time I came back from the deployment, having that success again, I started to get confidence, but then I overcorrected now in terms of like, I didn't have that NCO presence to help me with the accountability piece. And when I would like hold people accountable, I would do it the wrong way. Right. And so like, I just understand that course correction, like is an area where on how to treat people, when they make mistakes and hold them accountable the right way, is an area where I just really screwed up really badly. And again, it kind of goes back to the times where I've lost my cool, when I've been in those situations to where like something was very hurtful that happened to me, or that something's wrong, and so you get the knife hand effect kind of going on. And so learning how to step back and self-regulate, and then create space, is another thing too. I think, and a success story, in the military, we talk about being tactically patient all the time. Yeah. Since I retired, I don't know about you, Aaron, or what we think, Nolan, but like I look back and I had no idea what the hell strategic patience meant. And what I mean by that is like thinking deep in space and time and letting the game come to you. And I think it's really important for us to understand in terms of how we enter in our connections with people and how we enter in these relationships as being long-term, not transactional and not even relational, but being true connections, right? Even if for just a moment, because the part that I did well is like when I entered in baseball, it was like I was wearing my white belt all over again. I was starting all over. I don't know if there's any other veterans. I'm in this space I'd never been in before. I hadn't played baseball since I was high school. It's a whole nother level, right? And I was in the deep end in terms of deliberate discomfort. And the best advice that I got was from a really good friend. Shout out to Ben Freakley. You guys recognize the name Freakley, famous general and brothers that serve in the military. Ben did not, but he supported the Army as a mental skills coach, worked for the Blue Jays for a long time, now supporting veterans with fit ops. And he said, Andy, I think, what you need to do is just let the game come to you. I'm like, what the hell do you mean by that? You like Yoda or something? Like, what is this? Let the game come to me. I was like, build it, they will come. Was this Field of Dreams? What are we doing here? So I think what he meant is like, hey, just to show up and listen, shut your mouth and listen and be available and shag balls and have conversations by the cage and hit fungos and have lunch with the guys and don't worry about doing anything. And I think when I look back at my military career, it was like, you're on the time clock as soon as you show up as a leader. Like I got 2 years to make an impact or less. Right. And I got to make it happen at all costs, buy through with, let's just make it happen. Right. Well, when you're entering in a relationship that involves connection, especially as a mental skills guy, you have to have trust. It's the most important thing that you have. If you don't have trust, nothing else matters. Right. So I had to earn that trust from the guys as an outsider. And I think that what I learned in spring training over the course of 3 weeks in Arizona, it was just really a masterclass in life that I have now trying to take in everything that I do. And that is to let the game come to me. And sometimes sometimes when you're performing, it involves doing nothing. And I think sometimes when you're most effective in negotiating, you're not doing anything. You're letting them, it's almost kind of like this interpersonal Aikido that's happening, right? Yeah. So where you're accepting and kind of deflecting. I know I'm getting all California woo-woo on you guys, but but it's really true in practice, right? And I think if you just sometimes just slow down and stop trying so damn hard, that's when cool things happen.
Yeah, that's powerful because I think we always talk about tactical patience, but really talk about the strategic patience is a different mindset there. So yeah, I appreciate sharing that. So Andy, this is a podcast that is all about elevating your influence through purposeful negotiations. So as we start to close out this podcast, is there anything that Aaron and I didn't ask you that you want to share with our audience?
Ooh, ask me. I have a question for you guys. Like, what's your favorite book when it comes to anything having to do with what I'm talking about? Like how do you guys mentally prepare for the negotiation?
Well, so, I love in terms of, maybe, kind of from the psychology field, anything written by Brené Brown. I a lot of her works challenge my thinking. And I try to bring some of that into the negotiation realm. And then in terms of the things that we often talk about, where a lot of our thought process, so getting to yes, difficult conversations, the HBR Guide to Negotiating. Those are some works that really help kind of frame a new mindset, a new approach, discipline around preparation, the rehearsal piece you're talking about, thinking about how we measure success. And then really what you led with, which is the mindset shift, helps us to make better decisions at the table, which ultimately is what I want to do, right? If I'm going to elevate my performance and get that upper range of performance, I need to be able to make better decisions. And there's a lot before that that impacts it. So.
And then one of my favorite books, and we actually was able to bring him on to the show, is Gary Nestner with Stalling for Time. Just really understanding, the role that the negotiator can play when it is a, life or death kind of situation, and how basically stalling for time just inevitably is giving you, the negotiation or the negotiator, more headspace. It's giving the tactical team more time to prepare. And talking through that with Gary was pretty powerful. And so definitely that's one that comes top to mind right now.
Very cool. Yeah. I think these are all great suggestions too. I think my one I would add in there is the idea about motivational interviewing, which is just as a coach, I wish that I knew what the hell that was. I was introduced to it right before I became a mental skills coach. And it really, what is the art and science of how to ask really good questions, how to guide conversations. So I think it's a really good complementary skill. Coaching athletes to be their best is kind of my Bible. And I think it's a really good approach. Like, how can you approach negotiation like a coach? And so that's what I'd recommend too. But hey, all the tools you can add in the toolkit, are just going to make you and others better. So just keep treating all these interpersonal skills and negotiating like a performance, and you're going to go far.
Andy, I am going to ask one more question. I know Nolan wants to take us in around kind of wrap up, but we talk a lot about how these skills show up in our personal lives. You shared a success and failure. You're a husband, you're a father of 4, you're a Boy Scouts volunteer. You work with young people. You have some young people in your household. And again, no expectation that you always get it right. How do you try to apply these things just in kind of that more familial or just in terms of influence youth perspective? What can we learn in terms of just maybe a broader application there?
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts come to mind. I mean, kids are just the best negotiators. I mean, and I think when you think about like human beings are designed to negotiate, like just look at kids, I mean, kids are just the best at just manipulating, especially my daughter. Oh my God. Like she's got me, you guys know how it is. You got a daughter and you're screwed. Like she gets whatever she wants. That's right. And so she's really good at it as well too. I think this is really interesting one from a coaching standpoint, athletically. Like I think at youth sports, so I coach under 9 rugby, right? And it's a contact sport, and this is just on my mind. And I think like, when you're in a contact sport, like playing through injuries is like, kind of a big deal. Right. And they're experiencing this for the first time and they're trying to make decisions, about, hey, do I suck it up and continue to play or do I come back out too? Right. And I think as coaches, we had to enter in what our stance was. And what we came up with was like, hey, when in doubt, sit it out. Right. And this because we entered in like a difficult situation. We were in a tournament last weekend. I had a young player, I want to get into the terminology. She'd be like the quarterback. She's really small. We're playing another team, a bunch of big boys. Right. And the dad, who wasn't really familiar, he pulled me aside and said, hey, I'm really worried about my daughter. And my first reaction was like, hey, I understand, Dad, don't underestimate your daughter. And then I pushed back and I kind of created space and then I allowed him to talk. He says, I'm just worried about my daughter's health. I think she's overmatched and so forth. And just me taking that moment to show empathy instead of kind of shut him down, like, hey man, we got this, allowed me to kind of see it from a fatherly perspective and be like, hey, look, I totally understand. Like, we're not playing the World Cup here. All right. So like, what do you think we just sit her out, And, he was like, well, let's just wait and see. And so our goal in mind was for the health and safety and welfare of the kids. That was the goal. And that little micro negotiation that happened. Right. Mm. But it would have been very easy for me to say that as a coach to stay into my position, which would have been, well, we coached her the right technique and I know she's tough, so she's going to be just fine. Right. That would be, so for me to take away his position would undermine him and his choice as a father, which he still has a lot of influence over the situation too. So I think by doing that, I co-opted him. And I think his willingness to be able to maybe assume a calculated risk with his daughter, we didn't play that team, but I think it created a discussion that we hadn't had before as coaches in terms of what were the non-negotiables when it comes to injuries, right? Mm. Hey, look, so head and spine injuries, no way. There's no way. We're not even negotiating that too. But like for every situation, you got a rolled ankle, you got a whatever, we're going to have a little micro negotiations going on. I'm going to observe. The kid's going to tell me, I'm going to get a second opinion through the team mom. And then we're going to make a decision that's best for the child, right? And best for the team at the same time, right? So I think that would be a good example of like some little micro negotiations that are happening with me that I think about.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, Andy, before I kick it over to Aram to kind of highlight his takeaways from this episode, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I know that we learned a lot, and Aram and I say this a lot. This is going to be one of those episodes that you got to go back, listen 2-3 times to really be able to pull out everything that you were able to provide us. So thank you so much for everything, for showing up. We really appreciate it.
Hey, first thing I'm going to say is go Army, beat Navy. I don't get to say that on the program too often, but have an Army football player on. Thanks for joining us, Andy. And listen, so many things to take away. I hope people, we're calling this negotiating from the inside out. We take ourselves on, we can make better decisions, influence others. If we're going to work with others, then by, with, and through, as you think about managing supplier relationships or any customer relationship, our ability to practice these intrapersonal skills will enhance our ability to practice interpersonal skills better. And then I just think, what Andy was saying around our process to negotiation, our tendency to have some, I think what you called introspection, blind spots, where are we getting feedback? What are we doing around rehearsing? What are we doing around journaling? Those are just good practices that we can take from Andy's profession and apply to the field of negotiation too. So again, thanks, my friend, for being on with us.
Thanks, brother. Love you. You know that.
That's it for us on today's podcast. If you could please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, we greatly appreciate it. Helps us grow, helps us get in front of other listeners, and helps pass on these things on how to improve our skills, how to be better leaders at the end of the day. If there's anything that you want us to cover, please send us an email at team@negotiatex.com. We'll be happy to cover it. And if you and your organization are looking to get any training regarding negotiations, you have any big actual negotiations coming up, you need, someone else to help out with in a consultant form, by all means, reach out to us. We'll be happy to dig into that for you. So appreciate it. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.